Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to the Obvi Network's now part of VMware webinar. Today's topic is prevent threats with analytics-driven web application firewall WAF. We have a speaker today, Christian Tuller. He is our security ninja, and he actually presented a similar topic at VMworld just the past week also. So it's pretty fresh still. We'd like to share the contents with the general public. Now, before we start the presentation today, I'm just going to have a few housekeeping items to state. Okay. First of all, this webinar is being recorded right now, and you will receive an email shortly after this with the recording and links to the slides as well. If your coworker has missed it because of the time slots, or you feel the contents to be useful, feel free to forward the email along that contains the on-demand link. So without further ado, I'm actually going to hand over to Christian right now to start his presentation. Christian, you're on.
Thank you, Lei, and welcome everybody to this webinar. So let's go into the agenda to see what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I will talk a little bit about application security and why it has become critical and why there's a need for an application, for an analytics-driven application security. Then we will look at the analytics-driven web application firewall that we here in Obvi Networks, now part of VMware, have built in terms of a couple slides, and then we also jump into live demos of the solution. Then I want to share a customer success story with you and summarize what we've learned today in a couple final slides. So without further ado, so we'll probably have some time for a question in the end, so keep them coming, write them in the chat so we can talk about them in the end. All right, so let's start. Can anybody really name the latest data breach that they heard in the media? When I think of what I've heard latest, I can't really be sure if that's the latest data breach. And if it is, it's just coincidence. Because unfortunately, these days, these breaches happen way too often and way too in vast numbers, and therefore it's impossible to know them all. Take MoviePass, for example. Just a couple days ago, they lost customer data of about 58,000 people. That seems like a very small number compared to the 100 million records lost in the Capital One breach that we heard earlier last month. But it illustrates the issue even more, because not all breaches will be made public or will be in the media that you actually will read about it. And quite frankly, not all breaches will impact you directly. For example, I had never heard of MoviePass before, so I wasn't a customer of theirs. But the chances that some of us get impacted by the next breach or the next breach after are actually really, really high. Thankfully, there are websites like Have I Been Pwned that actually let you track stolen credentials. And unfortunately, that's only the data that made it to the public. So if you read a couple of days ago that of the very nice XKCD comic user forum, data got lost there as well, unfortunately, 500,000 entries there. So having all these breaches, it's a really good indicator that the prevalence of this data breaches is there, that we have many studies about them already. And such a study offers the possibility to gain a different perspective than looking just on the individual breach, looking at many breaches over a certain period of time. So let's have a look at one. So many companies in the security industry actually are keeping score of these breaches. One well-known source is the Verizon Data Breach Report. There are a lot of facts in the report, but I want to have us a closer look at two in particular. First of all, let's look at the number of incidents. As you can see, there are very high number of incidents that they are tracked here, nearly 42,000. And these range from denial of service attacks to payment card scammers. So everything in between is there. Today, we are talking about web applications. And it's interesting to know that web applications are only responsible for about 10% of all these incidents. When we look a little bit further, we will see that it's interesting that when it comes to actual breaches, that web applications claim the top spot with about 35%. And that is not that surprising when we examine the attack types a bit closer. For instance, a denial of service attack might bring down your website, but it will not necessarily result in a data breach. On the other hand, a SQL injection in a web application will allow the attacker to get all that data from the database. So that's a much higher breach correlator to have a web application with a vulnerability. And therefore, our first conclusion is that we need to have better application security and better defenses in front of these web applications that we host. Third, I want to take a look at another report. And actually, this is the Cost of a Data Breach report, also from this year by the Ponemon Institute, because this report takes it a little bit further. They actually look at the cost of data breaches. So, and when you look at their report, they claim that above 50% of all the breaches happening are from malicious attacks. Malicious attacks include web applications. And since it goes beyond just looking at the incident and the breach itself, they look at costs like the business loss when you have a data breach, what costs are there for detection and escalation, for notification costs of your customers, and the post-data breach cost, meaning that you actually have to, maybe you lost credit card data, so you have to pay for credit monitoring services. And when you look at these numbers, it comes down to nearly an average of $4 million per breach. And again, that looks quite small when we think about these massive breaches that we all read in the media. But it averages out with all the smaller ones that are happening every day that are tracked here as well. So why am I bringing this up? Because this report also has a bright side of looking at things that actually reduce the cost of a data breach. And I picked out of a lot of items, I picked 3 that actually make a difference to us here today in this webinar. So for example, the use of a DevSecOps approach, meaning that you have an API and you can do security automation, brings down the cost of a potential breach. Also, the extensive use of security analytics helps you to do a similar thing. And the report claims that a big problem in today's systems is the complexity for the security stance. So actually, by reducing the complexity, you can again reduce the potential cost of a data breach. So in final here, I want to highly recommend to read both these reports if you haven't done that yet, because it gives a very good overview of what's happening out there. So coming back to the story here, I want to thank you all for joining the webinar today, because I think it's important that we all show interest in how to secure our web applications better. Because having these web applications on the internet means that they impact all our lives, our children's, our parents, our families, and friends' lives. So these breaches affect everybody, and we who own these applications need to make sure they are secured. Now, we could argue that this is not a new problem. Like, we heard about application security and applications that get hacked for years now. So why has the security industry not solved this yet? And for that, I want to bring up a quote from the RSA conference in 2019. So this year in March, Pat Gelsinger, the VMware CEO, went to the stage and said, the biggest threat to security is actually the hyper focus on security threats. So what does that actually mean? It means that instead of actually protecting the applications better, the security budget is more spent on focusing on threats instead of protection. And he made 3 claims that what we should change here. First of all, we should invest in prevention, means block attacks instead of just detecting threats. Second one is focus on the application, have application-specific policies to these applications. And third, make security intrinsic. That means when you think about the report claimed that complexity is one of the big issues with security, actually baking in the security in your fabrics that you use, may it be your hypervisors, maybe it be your ADCs, and reduce the overall complexity and therefore make the security better. With that in mind, let's have a look at the solution that we want to present to you today. And then it has a new name. It was called AVI Vantage, and now it's called NSX Advanced Load Balancers. And I will probably switch back and forth between the terminologies, so please be aware of that. All right, so when we think about a WAF, why isn't a WAF not deployed in front of 100% of all web applications? The answer is because organizations still think that WAFs are really, really complex. And that is because of multiple things. And first of all, this starts with the rule complexity. So making sure that a rule is tight enough to actually block the attack, but not too tight to create false positives is a big problem. Then the overall lack of visibility that legacy web application firewalls had the problem that you didn't really have a good view of what actually happened in the system. And that is because they were built in a different age where visibility, where all these frameworks for having great telemetry weren't there. And lastly, the scalability. An application firewall needs CPU resources. So if you have an appliance-based model, it's impossible to just add more compute if you need it, because your application has a spike in the traffic and you want to handle that with the application firewall. And that makes it all really hard to use a legacy WAF. And I want to show you today how that can be done better. So to lay the foundation, I need to tell you a little bit about what is the architecture that the AVI solution is built in. So the biggest building block is the separate control and data plane. We have the controller, which is the brain of the system, and we have these service engines, which are small entities of the load balancing fabric that actually do the heavy work. But all the configuration or the telemetry is on the controller, or the automation or the APIs are on the controller. So these service engines scale out horizontally quite well. So if you need more capacity, if you want to add application security, application firewall to your fabric, then this is easily possible by adding more CPU power. So one of the important pieces is here that it doesn't really matter where you run these service engines. The service engines can run on a bare metal server, then they act like a software-defined hardware load balancer. They can be virtualized, run in containers, be virtualized in the cloud, or run in cloud containers as well. And we support here all the major clouds that you can think of, may it be AWS, Azure, Google, and so on. And this is very important because when you move your applications around today, because I don't know, you have a cloud migration strategy, then you start in the data center and you move to the cloud with the same fabric that runs your load balancing and all the other application services. Second of all, the intelligence. The controller has built-in telemetry that is gathered from all these service engines, brought to the controller, and has lots of algorithms built in that will show you what's going on in the system. And when we talk about analytics-driven web application security today, that is exactly what we need. We need as much information about the traffic, about the attacks, about the normal application behavior to actually secure the application better than before. And lastly, we're talking about automation here. And one important thing is that automation is not just having an API, but automation for us is being able to have actionable items that can, for example, auto-tune a policy by using all these intelligence feeds to actually do something automatic. And that's what we mean by automation here. So we've built the foundation, and the next up, I want to show you a little bit about the security stack that we built on top of this platform. So when you start at the lowest layer, we have these 3A4 firewall rules where you can do very basic port-based security rules. Then, of course, the load balancing fabric does all your SSL TLS needs. Similar rules are available on layer 7. So if you want to just do very basic content switching or blocking on a different item in your HTTP headers, for example, that's very easily done with the 7 firewall rules. Then the fabric has built-in DDoS protection. We can detect over 30 different types of DDoS that can reach the RV fabric, and actually mitigate with scaling and also with blocking of these attacks. Then on top of that, we have application rate limiting, so you can control and restrict who can access the application on an IP basis, on a client basis with this rate limiting. And on top of all of that is the web application firewall, which we will look in a little bit more closely here on the next slides. Since it's all based on this fabric, that brings us the real-time analytics, the visibility, the automation, programmability, the multi-cloud elastic fabric, and of course the centralized management, because that I didn't really talk to that in the previous slide, but of course the controller does all the configuration. And if you want to change a firewall policy, for example, an application firewall policy, you only need to do that once, because the controller takes care of all the other pushing to the service engines wherever the service is offered. So now let's step into the WAF and look at the core design principles. When we think back about the slide, why do organizations think that the WAF is hard to use and hard to maintain? When we thought about that, we wanted to make that a lot easier, and what we started with is this idea of automated policy creation. We have native OWASP to temp protection built in. That is kind of the foundation, and I'll walk you through how the policy is actually executed. On top of that, once you have the WAF in place, it will do policy learning for the application, so creates positive security rules that actually mimic the application behavior. And if you need to tune the policy for any reason at all, you can do that with the one-click policy tuning out of the log files where you might have found a false positive, or out of the analytics page as well, which is very handy and very easy to do in that regard. So that takes care of all the complexity with the rule set. Now, the second one is real-time insights, and here we have the full spectrum of all the intelligence of the attacks, of the application behavior, of all the rule matches, of the this application behavior is actually then the basis for all this learning that we do. And I'll show you that in the demos, because it's probably the best to be seen when it comes to these statistics and analytics. And lastly, the platform has the elasticity and the automation builder to provide all these, all the functionality with application firewall as well. When we talk about a WAF needs CPU time to run, that is the elasticity of the platform gives us the possibility to allow that without impacting any user here. It auto scales if you need more performance, and I already mentioned that a couple of times. It's an API first platform, so as an example, all the UI you see today is built on top of this API, same API that you would use in an SDK that we provide, or in Ansible or Terraform. That is the foundation, and you can script or you can automate all your needs on the load balancing side and also on the security side. So if we look to the capabilities of the application firewall here, you will see that all the features that you would expect from an application firewall are there. I already mentioned application learning and positive security already. Then the OWASP top 10 protection signatures are there. There are also app-specific rules. Every application firewall does HTTP protocol enforcement to actually lower the attack surface that's on board, and input validation, of course, for the standard web attacks like cross-site scripting and SQL injection as well. Then what you also can do is do virtual patching using our scripting engine. We call DataScript, for example, to combat application logic flaws. And while we're on this, there's built-in API protection, so you can protect JSON or XML APIs that run through the load balancing and web application firewall. Lastly, the metrics and statistics that allow us to assess the current application attack surface and help to tune it to the current application firewall policy. So how does it, so now we have a broad overview of what the capabilities are. Let's dig a little bit deeper, get a little bit more technical and see how it actually executes the policy. And here, from a mental picture, you have to think about that an application firewall has many use cases that it needs to cater to, and these use cases are in different parts of the policy, and I'll walk you through them. So first, we start with a whitelist policy within the WAF policy, and that is because you have traffic that you might need to bypass from the WAF. And that's with every application, and many other use cases are there. For example, if you have a security scanner that you want to shoot at the application directly without actually going to the WAF, you want to bypass the WAF traffic and bypass the traffic from WAF. And therefore, the whitelist possibility in the beginning here allows you to have a way to bypass trusted traffic or traffic that starts from a specific IP, for example, scanner's IP or internal traffic, to make sure you can actually bypass the WAF for that. You have many match criteria here, and it's very similar to all the other previously mentioned policies in layers 3, 4, and 7 in the security stack. Then what the next step would be, it will look into the positive security here. That is the positive definition of the application behavior. Since it mimics the application behavior that was learned through the learning engine, it will provide zero-day attack defense and also increases the performance for the WAF. The reason is when you have something learned as a parameter and you have a very strict regular expression for it, and it's deemed safe from the application firewall's learning, then we can actually bypass all the signature checks for that. So I'll give you an example, and I will show you one in the demo. You're learning a lot of parts of the application. There's a parameter that only has digits in there. If that has been learned and will be enforced, there's no reason if the parameter is actually only digits to look at the hundreds of signatures that would run after it. So you save a little bit of performance there as well. So PSM rules can come from the learning mode, the scanner. So for example, when you have external security scanners like a ZEP or a Qualys, then you can import these findings using scripts that we provide into the positive security as well. Or you can, of course, create manual routes here. If you have, for example, a security report in front of you, only in paper, then you can create manual routes very quickly as well. And lastly, last check here is signatures, which scan for the common web application attack patterns. So OWASP top 10 rules is something that you're probably then familiar with. And this different view on this would be, okay, the traffic comes in to our classifier, which runs the positive security model here. And if it's matched, it will get a fast pass, so it will not go into the deep inspection. But if the classifier does not match, it will go into the deep inspection and into the negative security model, means and will run the signature as well. And if the signature finds an attack, it will deny. If the signatures say that's fine, then we will allow the request, of course, as well. The whole system has a couple of advantages when it comes to false positives, because the more the system actually learned about the application and has a good confidence for these rules, the less the false positives chance is there as well, because you have less to actually inspect, and therefore less tuning needs as well. And keep in mind, when you enable this happens automatically in the background for you. And I'll walk you through that in our demo. So, but why is it all analytics driven? When you think about the data we collect, and again, I'll show you more in the demo as well. We collect many different types of data. And just to give you a size here, that we have nearly 1,000 data points today, which we collect. We don't necessarily show all of this to the users, because that would be way too overwhelming, but we use it internally to create the health score of the application, to help make decisions when it comes to the application learning. So all that data is there, but not necessarily consumable for the user of the product. So, but these types of analytics that we collect, for example, application. So when you have a load balancer, you want to know the end-to-end timing or the health monitoring, and we capture all of that on every request. When it comes to end-to-end timing, we also capture the runtime of the application firewall, so you can actually see if a rule in your policy might run too long, and how much time overall the application firewall took to actually evaluate that request. That can be very, very helpful if you're looking at long-running requests, and that might be caused by the application firewall itself, or it might be caused by an attacker that tries to DOS your application firewall by sending arbitrary data that tries to exploit the rules. And you will see that very quickly, because of that's one of the pre-computed analytics that is available. Then when we come to security, I will show you the attack patterns, the analytics for the WAF. There's DDoS traffic patterns that we will monitor and have as analytics. Then the application response, of course, is measured as well, because from my perspective, when you want to learn something from the application's learning mode perspective, you don't want to learn an application error. So we monitor all of that. So if we deem the request as okay, but we actually get a 404 back because it's not there, that is not a request that will be deemed okay by the learning engine. Then, of course, we look at the response timing from the application. If that's going up, the attacker might have found a DOS on the application, so we can actually showcase that very quickly as well. And then we do a lot of client statistics as well, so all the pieces of where the client is coming from, and all of that, what kind of a machine is using, and so on. Also client fingerprint or client authentication. So if you use the RV platform as a SAML authentication front end, then that is also taken care of and available for you in the metrics database. All these metrics that I mentioned are accessible via the API as well. So if you want to take them anywhere outside the system in an external database, that's and look at them differently, that's all possible, because again, this is an API first product. So last slide before we jump into the demos, I want to talk a little bit more about security automation, because that is when we think about the report that said, okay, have a DevSecOps approach, that's very good to actually make sure you have a better response to a potential breach. the AVI product and the web application firewall on top of it can support that very, very well. So first of all, when you can deploy everywhere, when you can hook into all these different hypervisors or different clouds, bringing a load balancing fabric like AVI into the picture is really, really easy because you roll it out in your pipeline. So we are full CI/CD capable. If you want to hear more about this, we actually did a webinar earlier this year where I showcased the full capability of running a WAF or running our WAF in the context of a CI/CD pipeline, complete with canary deployment, blue-green release of different of moving between releases when all the tests are passing and so on. Then the automated rule updates can run in that as well. So if you bring out a new application, you run into or it continuously updates the rules with the learning engine as well. I already mentioned this security scanner input as well. So if you automate these scanners, you can feed the results of those scanners automatically into the application firewall as well. And I talked about the analytics engine and the application behavior learning already, and I'll show you that in the demo in a second. All right, so let's hope the demo gods are with us. So I'll switch to the demo environment. Two demos I want to show to you today. The first one is giving you a small introduction into the AVI product and the web application firewall in particular. And the second demo is how do I actually onboard a new application very quickly with the application firewall and learn the application behavior. So basically what I just told you about in the slides can in a demo, and I'll tell you all about that in a second. So if we have in many applications configured or many virtual services as in this demo system, if we have one that is secured via the application firewall, we actually can see that by the little shield around the health score here, and we can actually go into the virtual service here and have a look. So the virtual service represents your application. The controller takes care of where this application is hosted on which service engine. That's all done automatically for you. For the admin, this is your interface centrally on the controller. And for us, the important piece is how do I enable the application firewall? That is very easily done by adding or editing here the virtual service, and there's a WAF policy and a WAF error page profile that helps us to present a nice error page later when the WAF actually blocks. And the WAF policy is the one where we have the protection enabled. So we have two things, and forgive me if I'm jumping quickly through this because it's actually not that complicated. This install here does not have learning enabled. It simply has the overstop 10 protection enabled. So it will allow us to define a profile for the policy, which covers pieces like reducing the attack surface from the HTTP methods, options, versions, content types, and so on. It also lets us define default actions, what will actually happen when the WAF blocks, and other settings, which are usually fine if you leave them by default here. And then the rules will actually have the actual signatures, and we have lots of those that will look for specific attacks here. This is the cross-site scripting one, and you have all kinds of injection. And these rules will then look for example, secret injection. And in case we find a false positive, we can very easily tune them. So you always have the possibility to have custom rules as well. before the core rule set or after, that's up to you. So how do we see now what's happening? And I can let us look at the next step here, and that's the log files, and let's find some significant logs. So significant logs are for us where the system thinks these are significant for the admin to look at. We have a couple here where the WAF flagged the request. And as already told you, there's lots and lots of data about that request, starting from where the location of that IP address is, what computer and so on, what was used, what was the request, what was the URL, and so on. And if we scroll down, we actually get the WAF hits, essentially everything that belongs to WAF. So here we get the timing. I told you before we have full WAF timing here, how long did it take for the WAF to respond. And then you can see which rules are actually matched here. So this was a SQL injection attempt on the argument ID. This is the full attack pattern. So somebody tried to do an 1 = 0 union and so on. Certainly a SQL injection attack, and this got blocked by many rules here, actually by 2 rules, because this is an obvious SQL injection. So now, in the case that I want to tune the policy to remove that block, because let's assume this is a false positive, we can do this directly here from the log file by adding exceptions to the policy that we've seen earlier. And the system will pre-fill me everything that I need, and I can just delete what I don't want. So if I want to allow this particular request through next time from this particular rule, all I need to do is add the new exception here and hit save, and it will automatically do that for me in the policy. And I'll show you how that looks in the policy, and then we'll move on to looking at more analytics. So here we'll have these little funnel symbols now, which allow us to find the rule, and there's now an exception configured. So out of the log file, with the context that you had from the actual block, you can change the policy very quickly with this, with the exclusion tuning. And then next up, the system will pre-compute analytics. And as I said, we have many built in, but some of them are really useful to show and pre-compute here. For example, which WAF rules hit. So if we look at, okay, this is, for example, the check for a directory listing, which got hit quite often, and we can immediately do filters for them and have a look what actually happened here. And you can see that this IP address did a lot of bad things. So how can we actually see more correlated view? Let's take a look at the WAF analytics here and see what happened over time. So I'm displaying the last 6 hours, and we're looking at what happened in the last 6 hours in terms of the WAF here, and we see that there was actually a spike here in attacks, WAF attacks. And I can tell you why, because I used the security scanner to fire on this virtual service to get us some data. The idea is here to see that very quickly and to drill down what actually happened, because now I can drill down, okay, this client IP actually did a lot of attacks here. And where did it do the attacks? It tried the login PHP. And we can see that this was obviously a scanner, because it tried every little argument on that site and tried to break in. And this will, the WAF analytics page will allow us to very quickly drill down to if I have issues or if I have attacks. And now I can, for example, take that IP address and block it, or do rate limiting on it. All of that very quickly. And if I want to see, for example, this particular rule, because again, let's assume it's a false positive, then I can do the same exclusion here. A similar idea as out of the log file, we can do a similar here on the Web Analytics page. And lastly, if I want to learn more, I can actually preview the logs, and okay, should be able to preview the logs. If this is a bug that got fixed already, unfortunately, so I can't preview the logs, but I could jump into the log file from there. So this is my basic demo for just giving you an overview of how a very simple setup works. Now I want to do a second demo where I run you through how would I set up a new application, actually use all the learning functionality built into the product. And for that, a couple of housekeeping notes here as well. So this is a completely empty system. So I will use a couple of setup scripts to actually get me there more quickly, and I will run those in a second to set up, for example, my virtual services. I could do all this by hand, but then we would go through, or we would not be within the hour to finish this webinar. So, and secondly, what I will do, I will tune the parameters of the learning in a way that we will actually get results within 5 minutes. In a production environment, we have a much higher confidence intervals and timelines that I would use to be on the safe side for the learning mechanism. So let's start by actually looking at setting up the demo. And here I have a demo setup script that my demo will now be set up. So we here I'm using Python and the SDK. So our SDK is available on GitHub. That allows you to very easily talk to the controller. So this is my controller IP. It sets up 2 VIPs here, creates the pool, creates the WAF policy and the profile and the error page. And now when we go back, we actually see that we have set up 2 new virtual services. The application that is provided here is Hackathon, which is a nice hacking application for in the form of a shop that allows us to go through it. So just to make sure we are on the right page here, let me go into the virtual service and see that we got logs. And yeah, so we got logs for my clicks on the application. So that was the first step, just creating the virtual service and then running the visiting the page. Second step is, okay, we now need to initialize the learning, and there's a second script I run here. So I enable the learning on the policy, and I'll show you that as well. And I'm setting a couple of extra items here in terms of the learning that I told you earlier about how that we actually get data here. So in the policy, we'll look at the profile where we have this learning data set. So here application learning is set. We have a sampling rate of 100%. So we want to allow every customer to learn their application traffic, even if they already run at a very high load. And therefore, we allow the system to use sampling as well. So if you only learn 10% of the traffic, you have to learn longer, but it still works, and you consume a lot less resources. So that's available. Having said that, the learning mechanism doesn't take a lot of resources, but we want to make sure that it's available. Secondly, auto rule updates. I said earlier, we program rules once we have a very high confidence these rules apply. And I set the auto promotion here to very, very high. The learning interval is 1 minute, so we actually see something, and the max parameters is 100 for now, and the min hits to learn is 10, meaning that it needs to see one particular item 10 times in a similar fashion, so it actually will see it as enough to learn. So that said, then I need to enable learning here, and what this provides me is actually a new group in this positive security that is now empty. It has no locations yet. The learning mode will create the rules in here for us. So let me save that and save that too. And now I need traffic, right? So what I'm doing, I'm using a third script. Actually, I'm spidering the web page now. So again, this is a script, a Python script that runs or that connects to a ZAP proxy as Spider, and the ZAP proxy will now run through the web page and look at all the different pieces of information that it finds, and visits all the web pages, uses all the available links and so on within that page. So while that Spider is running, I want to give you one more insight. So told you we have a lot of metrics. So we built a little tool that actually can show you or create queries to that metrics more easily. So could you just use general metrics and get service engine and virtual service metrics, or I can do learning and it pre-fills me, okay, I have a hackathon VS, I have a hackathon policy, and then I submit to true. And here you see that it already learned some. So this is so first of all, it creates me this URL, which is the complete request that it would fire against that it fires against the API, and then I get the JSON data of the learned item. So it already found that under the location product view as a parameter ID, it's digits and it's small, and it has seen it quite some time already, and so on. In total, it has seen 21 parameter, but only 9% of those parameters are yet of high confidence. And so over time, again, I did make the thresholds really low to have more data. We can reevaluate that and already now, since the Spider is continually sending hundreds of requests to the system, we get more data here as well. And how do we see this now programmed? So we go into the virtual service in our policy and look at the positive security model here. And we can see that the confidence for these locations is already that high that we can see, okay, it has this argument ID programmed as a rule, and that rule is the ID parameter with a value pattern 0 to 9, so it's a digit max length of 16, and that was programmed. And the learning algorithm will take care of updating all of these rules for you while it's running. And it only takes into account the successful requests that came back successful from the backend. And of course, if it has no rule here for it, it will always check it with the signatures as well. And if the signatures will mark it as an attack, it will of course not learn it as a valid request. So while this is going on, I'm showing you two more things. First of all, previously I haven't told you about the policy mode. So for the policy, you can run in detection or enforcement mode. Detection means it is just writing to the log file when a violation happened, and enforcement, it will actually block the request. So in our case here, to give you better feedback what's happening, we actually switched this to enforcement and try now to attack the hackathon application. And the hackathon application, here you can do all kinds of things. In my case, what I need to do is now look at these ID parameters. We've seen they got learned already. So let's do any other crazy thing with it. So let's do just a code here and try to see if we can find out if that's maybe brings me a SQL error. Maybe there's a sequence ejection possibility here. So, but we get the 4.3, and this is the response code the WAF will send, and it will is a fully customizable error page here. The important piece is that it allows us to show a request ID, which if you have a support center that might work on resolving issues for users of the web page, will allow us now in the search field here to very quickly find the request concerning the this particular request ID. So we can see that this was rejected by WAF, got a 4.3 response code, therefore it wasn't learned. You see all these WAF hits again, what happened here, and we can drill down what actually was the problem here. So the positive security engine said on this location, the argument rule ID was not what it's supposed to be. The match element did indeed violate the rule there. So this for this I didn't have to do any manual work. You can fully integrate this learning into a pipeline if you roll out an application, and you will get a an application-centric policy here. So two final things for the demo. So we've seen here the learning group. It continuously gets updated. You see matches. You see also when it didn't match, not for this one, for the other one. We should see when it didn't match, hasn't updated yet. You can have multiple rules in a location. That's also possible. So if here, for example, in the FAQ section, have user email and user question, which has learned, and so on. And it really takes full care of the application specific rules for you. And if you, for example, take a scanner input that have a DAS scanner that scanned your site and you have a security vulnerability, rules can be imported here as well through scripts. And lastly, whitelist, I told you about it earlier. Said it's relatively simple to do. Yeah, if you have, for example, the client IP that you want to have a specific one that shouldn't hit the WAF, you can say, okay, this specific IP address should just be allowed. So if you have a request coming from there, you want to allow it, right? So I need to give it a name as well. Very quickly, you can set up all these little rules around what you need in your specific environment. All right, so I need to finish with the demo now and get back to the slides. So I want to tell you very quickly about one of the customers that I've been working with for the last 2 years. A very interesting success story where you see essentially what's happening, what I told you about how customers are moving to maybe a new data center or a new cloud. So Swisslos, one of our customers that implemented the WAF over 2 years ago, they had the challenge of modernizing their data center to replace legacy hardware. They had an appliance-based WAF as well. So they had lack of elasticity and couldn't always provide best performance, and that resulted in and the customer experience not being good. So they implemented Avi because it was a very easy to deploy solution for them. It provided them cost reduction because they could scale down when in a lottery, you have jackpots, you have these spikes in traffic, and then you scale down afterwards. And they use the API first model for automation and self-service, which was very high on their list as well. And we checked back in with them last month. So after 2 years, they have successfully, Avi has successfully handled all the scaling requirements for them. All these seasonal traffic peaks were perfectly handled, and they could scale, and had actually a lot of savings for this in the end. All right, so I want to finish with one more slide, and that is when we look at the initial statement why application security has failed the customers. We talked about 3 different things. Invest in prevention, focus on applications, and make security intrinsic. When you deploy an application firewall, you're reducing the attack surface of your application, so you're preventing attacks from actually happening. If you focus on applications, we have a system that automatically creates application-based policies, application-based rules that get auto-tuned, like in our example, that focuses the security on your applications and makes it better that way. And lastly, if you're using Avi as your fabric for all your load balancing and needs, the security piece is built in, so it's intrinsic. You don't need another layer of security added or another layer of anything added to provide the security. And with that, I thank you very much for attending this webinar. Let me see if there are any questions.
Yeah, Christian. So we actually receive a lot of questions, but unfortunately, because of the lack of time, I'm actually going to summarize it real quick. We have basically a few theme of the questions. The first question is around, how we, compare with, Imperva, F5, or Cisco Palo Alto WAF products. And I think through the demo that Christian has shown, that our product is really kind of policy based, and it's you don't need to do a lot of complex scripting. I mean, a lot of our design principle is to make sure we simplify the experience for you so that you can actually prevent threats and protect your applications against attacks. And then also another thing I want to point out is our WAF is a single SKU with our load balancing product. It doesn't require additional licensing to use the product. It's a built-in feature with our platform. That's number one. Number two, kind of general questions like, how do I get trial? How do I get my hands on with the product? So Rafael, you asked this question, and I said the best way is to, if you can't wait, is to reach directly to us to schedule a demo. And we will make sure that we will try to provide you with a self-service experience as much as possible. All we need is to know the duration that you want to access the lab system, and we do provision accounts. So the bottom line is we do not need to ship a box to you to try our product at all. Now, for other people who would like to, get some information first, I have, listed some links in the chat window, so everybody could take their time to learn about the system first, look at the KB online. Another way is I want to drive attendance to is in October, we're actually going to run this virtual workshop, hands-on lab, exactly to satisfy some of the audience who wants to explore our system relatively on their own. We will just be in the background in the Zoom room to entertain any questions you may have. We're also able to monitor what you have done, which virtual services you created, and troubleshoot for you if needed. But otherwise, we can interact as little as you want so that you can explore the products on your own. That's hopefully I addressed some of the questions that people have been asking about experiencing our product. And one more question is whether we're able to send the slides and the recording. Yes, I've stated in the beginning that you're going to receive an email shortly after, and I'm pretty sure with this really powerful demos that Christian's done, you probably want to go over it again and in the recording. So sorry that we couldn't get to all the questions live, but we will make sure that we connect back with you offline, especially some of the technical questions in details. Okay? All right, Christian, thanks a lot for your presentation and demo, and thanks everyone too.
Thank you all for joining this webinar.
Mhm.